Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring the life and legacy of a truly monumental figure in American history, Madam C.J. Walker, who was born Sarah Breedlove.
And our goal is to really go beyond the headlines. You often just hear the word millionaire, but that title, it almost undersells the story.
It really does. We want to understand the system she built, the sheer force of will it took, and, the incredible social mission that was at the heart of everything she did.
It's so important to frame her success, not just as an individual achievement, which it was, of course, but as a system of social empowerment, a system she built in the face of just incredible systemic barriers.
Absolutely. And the popular narrative, even the Guinness Book of World Records, lists her as the first female self-made millionaire in America.
It does, and while that's the most common understanding, we should add a bit of historical nuance there. As we dig into the documentation, sources do confirm that other successful Black women, most notably Mary Ellen Pleasant, might have amassed that kind of wealth first.
Through things like real estate, right? Not a consumer products company.
Exactly, and that's the key distinction. It all comes down to the paper trail. Walker's fortune, it was generated through a publicly documented manufacturing company.
With meticulously recorded sales figures, clear, traceable assets.
Right, and that's what solidifies her place. It makes her the first verifiably documented self-made female millionaire in U.S. history. That verifiable success made her not just wealthy, but an undeniable symbol of what was possible.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're moving past the simple title. We're going to trace the steps of Sarah Breedlove, a Black woman born free just after the Civil War, and understand how she transformed herself from an orphan child laborer into a manufacturing magnate, a powerful activist, and a dedicated philanthropist.
We want to really get into the nuts and bolts of the economic engine she built, the Walker system, and the sweeping impact it had on the lives of thousands and thousands of other women.
To really grasp the heights she reached, I think you have to start with the depths of her origins. They were brutal. Sarah Breedlove was born on December 23, 1867.
And the location is so specific and historically charged. She was born near Delta, Louisiana, in what was then known as the 5th Military District.
And that detail, the 5th Military District, is absolutely critical to understanding her world.
It is. Her parents, Owen and Minerva Breedlove, and her older siblings, they had all been enslaved people on a Madison Parish plantation. Sarah was the very first child in her family born into freedom.
Just a few years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So this is technical freedom, but freedom in, a deeply unstable and dangerous environment.
And that's where that military district detail comes in. After the Civil War, Reconstruction divided the South into 5 of these districts, which were administered by the Union only.
Their job was to oversee the transition, to enforce the new 14th Amendment, and to try and uphold the rights of free people.
So her birth in that district, while it certainly didn't guarantee her safety, it at least placed her life under a legal framework that was backed by federal authority. It reinforced the legal basis of her freedom from day one.
But that freedom was immediately met with just profound tragedy. The sources detail an incredibly difficult early life.
It's heartbreaking. Her mother died in 1872. It was likely from the cholera epidemic that was moving up the Mississippi River at the time.
And then her father remarried, but died only a year later.
So by the age of 7, she was completely orphaned. You have to just pause and try to imagine that level of vulnerability, of destitution for a 7-year-old child.
At age 10, she moves from Louisiana to Vicksburg, Mississippi, to live with her older sister, Lavinia, and her brother-in-law, Jesse Powell.
And survival meant work, immediate work. She began working as a child domestic servant, laboring in other people's homes before she was even a teenager.
This wasn't just helping out around the house. This was essential labor just to have a roof over her head.
And you can see how this experience shapes her entire philosophy later in life. She often spoke about it herself.
Right. There's that quote where she says, "I had little or no opportunity when I started out in life, having been left an orphan and being without mother or father since I was 7 years of age."
Her determination wasn't just, some abstract ambition. It came from the sheer desperate necessity of independence.
And that struggle, it just intensified.
Right.
Which leads to one of the most sobering details of her life.
It really is. She married a man named Moses McWilliams in 1882. She was just 14 years old.
And the sources are very explicit about why. This was a strategic move. It was a desperate flight to escape severe abuse from her brother-in-law, Jesse Powell.
You have to understand the societal context here. For a young Black woman in the post-Reconstruction South, there were virtually no social safety nets, no legal protections, no real recourse against domestic violence.
So marriage, even at 14, wasn't just a tradition. It was literally the only viable way for her to escape a dangerous home and establish her own household, however precarious that might be.
They had a daughter, Lelia, in 1885, but tragedy struck again. Moses died in 1887.
Which left Sarah a widow at just 20 years old, with a 2-year-old child to support entirely on her own.
And now, the full weight of providing for two people fell on a woman with almost no formal schooling whatsoever.
And her educational background? It's just staggering. The sources note she had only about 3 months of formal education. 3 months.
And that was acquired through Sunday school literacy lessons at her church. That's it. That is the entire formal foundation for a woman who would go on to build one of the most successful international Black-owned corporations of the entire 20th century.
So everything that came after, her knowledge of business, of chemistry, of sales,
Yeah.
it was all entirely self-directed, an education she built for herself from scratch.
After Moses' death, finding better economic opportunities became everything, especially for her daughter, Lelia. So in 1888, she moved to St. Louis.
To be closer to her brothers, right? They had already established themselves there.
They had. And she immediately found work, but it was a real struggle. She worked as a laundress, earning barely more than $1 a day.
Just think about that. $1 a day to support yourself and a small child.
And her motivation was singular and incredibly powerful. She was absolutely determined to earn enough money to make sure Lelia received a proper, formal education. The education she herself was so cruelly denied.
So that goal really elevated her. It took her from just being a wage earner to an aspiring entrepreneur. She was working for something much bigger than herself.
And we should also appreciate the setting. St. Louis in the late 1880s and 90s was this incredibly vibrant place. She lived in a community where ragtime music was literally being invented.
And she was very active in her church, the St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Right, and being in that church community, being surrounded by other aspiring, educated women, it just further solidified her own desire for upward mobility, for a more sophisticated professional life.
But it was the conditions of the time that directly led to her breakthrough business idea. She personally suffered from some pretty severe scalp ailments.
Yes, she had extensive dandruff, hair loss, baldness, and this was not unique to her at all.
No, this was a ubiquitous health crisis, especially in the Black community. And it was driven by several factors.
You have to remember, in that era, especially in lower-income communities, most homes just didn't have indoor plumbing or central heating.
Which meant infrequent bathing and, crucially, infrequent hair washing.
Exactly. And when people did wash their hair, they often used these harsh lye-based soaps that were really meant for laundry. They would strip the hair and burn the scalp.
You combine that with poor diet, with illness, and you get an epidemic of skin disorders and hair loss.
And that was the massive, unaddressed consumer need that she recognized from her own personal experience.
So she starts gathering knowledge. Her brothers in St. Louis were barbers, so she began learning professional hair care techniques from them. That was the first step.
The next step, the real apprenticeship, came around the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis. She became a commission agent.
Selling products for Annie Turnbow Malone.
Right. A highly successful African-American hair care entrepreneur who owned the Poro Company. Working for Poro was her business school.
While she was working for Malone, Sarah, who was nearly 40 at this point, began using what she'd learned to formulate her own product line.
And then in July of 1905, she makes this critical decision. She moves with Lelia to Denver, Colorado. Initially, she's still selling Malone's products, but she's also, at the same time, launching her own separate venture.
And this is where things get complicated. This is where the competition really heats up.
It does. Malone accused Walker of stealing her product formula, which led to a very fierce falling out between them.
But let's look at that claim with some historical perspective.
If you look at the ingredients, the core product was often a mix of petroleum jelly and sulfur. It was used for conditioning and treating scalp issues, but that formula, it had been used in folk remedies for nearly a century.
So the innovation wasn't the chemical formula itself, which was pretty widely known.
No. The innovation was Sarah Breedlove's system, her systematic application, her branding, and her distribution method. That was the genius. She moved to Denver specifically to focus on her own branding and packaging.
To establish herself as an independent hairdresser and cosmetic retailer, completely separate from the Poro Company.
And then she takes this vital step to professionalize her image. In 1906, she marries Charles Joseph Walker, a newspaper advertising salesman she knew from St. Louis.
And she strategically rebrands herself as Madame C.J. Walker.
That title, Madame, was so clever, it was adopted from the French beauty industry pioneers. It instantly signaled sophistication and quality to her customers.
And Charles, with his background in advertising and promotion, he provided crucial advice on how to market this new, sophisticated brand.
And this all leads to the famed Walker system. It was so much more than just a single product, the wonderful hair grower pomade. It was a comprehensive grooming method.
Designed to promote scalp health first and then condition the hair.
Exactly. The system included specific instructions for shampooing, the application of her pomade, strenuous brushing to stimulate the scalp, and the careful use of heated iron combs.
Let's talk about the iron comb, because that's often a point of historical controversy. It gets linked to the debate over straightening black hair.
It does. And in the early 20th century, using hot metal tools, often called pressing combs, was a popular way to temporarily straighten and manage tightly coiled hair. It allowed for new styling possibilities.
And the critics argued this was just adopting white beauty standards.
They did, but Walker was very careful in how she branded her system. It was always presented as restorative and health-focused. She didn't just sell the combs, she sold the professional application and the conditioning products that made the process safe and non-damaging.
Her argument was that her goal was to make brittle, lackluster hair soft and luxurious.
And she achieved that through a system that focused on the scalp first, not just the styling. It was about health, not just aesthetics.
Her marketing strategy was just a masterclass in direct engagement.
Absolutely. She sold her products door to door, which was brilliant. It allowed for immediate demonstration and education.
She was personally training black women on how to groom and style their hair, building a personal rapport and incredible brand loyalty.
And she backed that up with heavy, targeted advertising in African-American newspapers and magazines. And she was just tireless in her promotional travel, building her celebrity and her business at the exact same time.
So once the Walker system proved successful through this, aggressive door-to-door marketing, the next big challenge was scaling. How do you go from a small operation to a national enterprise?
Exactly. This wasn't about mixing products in a kitchen anymore. This required real industrial ambition. It required institutional infrastructure.
Which is why that move in 1910 was so pivotal. She relocates the entire business to Indianapolis.
Right. She establishes the official headquarters for the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company there. Indianapolis was a great choice. It offered better logistical access. It was a growing city. It was a railroad hub.
And she invested heavily. She built a dedicated factory, a high-end hair salon, and this is so critical, a beauty school to train her agents.
And on top of that, she even added a laboratory for ongoing research and development. This shows a real commitment to industrial-scale professionalism, to making sure her products were effective.
She also assembled this really powerful professional staff in Indianapolis.
She did. This included her legal counsel, Freeman Ransom, and Robert Lee Brokenburr, who would both become these highly respected figures in the city. Another key figure was Marjorie Joyner, who would later innovate and revolutionize their training methods.
And what's often missed, and what was so revolutionary for the time, is that many of the key management and staff positions in her company were held by women.
It was a business built by black women for black women from top to bottom.
The training arm of the business was the real economic engine, though.
Without a doubt. She had established Lelia College, named for her daughter Alelia in Pittsburgh, as early as 1908. This was to train what she called hair culturists.
And this college concept, it provided the foundational training for her army of sales agents, who were the absolute lifeblood of the whole operation.
And you have to understand, this goes so far beyond a typical sales force. Walker was this uncompromising, very vocal advocate for the economic independence of black women.
She used these Walker system training programs to license sales agents.
Yeah.
And they earned really healthy commissions.
For a woman who might have previously worked as a laundress or a domestic servant, earning that $1 a day we talked about, these commissions offered real, steady, substantial income. It gave them a level of financial autonomy they just could not access anywhere else in the economy.
And the scale is just mind-boggling when you look at the numbers.
It is. Between 1911 and 1919, the company employed several thousand women as sales agents. By 1917, they claimed to have trained nearly 20,000 women.
20,000. That's not just a company. That's a national and soon-to-be international network of professional female entrepreneurs.
And the training, it went so far beyond just how to apply pomade or use a hot comb.
Right. The sources really emphasize this. She taught these women essential life and business skills.
Things like how to budget their earnings, how to manage their local territories, how to build and operate their own local businesses.
And ultimately, how to achieve financial independence and, respectability in their communities. She was actively building economic capacity, building confidence. She was creating a new professional class.
This commitment to community uplift, it eventually became formalized. This is another structural element of her genius.
In 1917, she takes inspiration from established organizations like the National Association of Colored Women.
And she organizes her massive sales force into state and local clubs. This leads to the formation of the National Beauty Culturists and Benevolent Association of Madam C.J. Walker Agents.
So it's essentially an early professional union, a business network for women entrepreneurs.
It is. And the first annual conference was held in Philadelphia in the summer of 1917. It drew 200 attendees. This was a truly groundbreaking event.
It was one of the very first national conventions of women entrepreneurs specifically dedicated to discussing business, commerce, and community welfare. And it was all organized by and for Black women.
And this is where you can see her model of what we'd now call corporate social responsibility baked right into the business structure.
How so?
Well, at the convention, she didn't just give out prizes for top sales figures or for recruiting the most new agents.
She also gave prizes for something else.
Yes. She strategically gave prizes and public recognition to the agents who had made the most substantial charitable contributions in their own local communities.
So she's integrating commerce with philanthropy right at the core of the organization.
She was ensuring that the agents understood that their personal success was directly and inextricably tied to the welfare of their community.
That structural link is just profound. It shows that her business model wasn't simply extractive, it was symbiotic.
The agents benefited, the company benefited, and the communities they served were expected to benefit as well. It was a virtuous cycle.
And that momentum, it didn't even stop with her death in 1919.
No, the company was so resilient. By the 1920s, it successfully expanded internationally, opening up markets and training agents in Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Panama, Costa Rica.
The global reach of her vision continued, providing economic opportunity all throughout the African diaspora.
So as Madam Walker's financial wealth grew, so did her influence, her voice on national issues. Her success transformed her from just a businesswoman into a political and social platform.
She very consciously recognized that her story, this rags to riches story, was a powerful tool for inspiration and for advocacy.
And the most famous example of this came in 1912. She was at the annual gathering of the National Negro Business League, the NNBL.
And she famously stands up and declares from the convention floor, really challenging the largely male audience there.
The quote is legendary. She says, "I am a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South. From there, I was promoted to the wash tub. From there, I was promoted to the cook kitchen. And from there, I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations."
And she ends with, "I have built my own factory on my own ground."
That quote is it's the definitive encapsulation of the self-made American dream, but it's specifically tailored to the Black experience in the early 20th century.
The emphasis on promoted myself and my own ground. It's a declaration of ownership, of self-determination.
To an entire generation, and especially to the women who were watching her rise, it demonstrated that capital and ownership were actually attainable.
And that declaration, it earned her the stage. The very next year, she was invited back to address the NNBL convention as the keynote speaker.
She was no longer just a delegate in the audience. She was now the one showing everyone else the pathway to independence.
Her business and her philanthropy were, as we said, deeply rooted in her Christian faith and her membership in the AME Church. Her giving was systematic, it was generous, and it focused heavily on education and vocational training.
When you look at the list of major beneficiaries in our sources, you see a very clear strategy. For instance, she pledged $1,000 to the building fund for the Senate Avenue YMCA in Indianapolis,
recognizing the need for recreational and communal facilities for Black men and boys.
Exactly. She also contributed scholarship funds to the Tuskegee Institute, which was founded by Booker T. Washington.
Supporting Tuskegee was a strategic move. It aligned her wealth with that movement for Black vocational and industrial training.
Right. And other critical beneficiaries included Flanner House in Indianapolis, Bethel AME Church, the Palmer Memorial Institute in North Carolina, and Mary McLeod Bethune's School in Daytona.
Which later evolved into Bethune-Cookman University.
It did. And funding these schools meant investing directly in the future leadership and the economic stability of the entire community. She was also a dedicated patron of the arts, both in Indianapolis and later in Harlem.
And that move to New York in 1916, it was a huge step. Her focus expanded geographically and politically. She joined her daughter, Alelia, in Harlem.
And even though the company headquarters stayed in Indianapolis, this move put her at the absolute epicenter of the burgeoning Harlem Renaissance and all the political and cultural movements of that era.
She immediately became intertwined with the intellectual and political elite of the time.
Forming friendships and working partnerships with figures like Booker T. Washington, Mary McLeod Bethune, and W.E.B. Du Bois. She used her visibility not just to sell products, but to deliver lectures on pressing political, economic, and social issues at conventions sponsored by these powerful Black institutions.
Her activism was also highly practical, especially as World War I was raging.
She was a leader in the Circle for Negro War Relief, providing support to Black service members and their families, and she actively advocated for a training camp for Black Army officers, pushing for equal opportunity in military leadership.
But one of her most significant political actions was her decisive involvement with the NAACP in New York.
In 1917, she joined the executive committee of the New York chapter, and she personally helped organize the silent protest parade on Fifth Avenue.
This was a massive, solemn, highly visible political statement.
Over 8,000 African Americans marched in complete silence. It was organized specifically to demonstrate sympathy for the victims and to protest the horrific East St. Louis riot that happened that year.
A truly terrible atrocity that resulted in the deaths of at least 39 African Americans. It was an act of brutal racial terrorism.
And Walker used her visibility, her money, and her organizational skills to demand justice and to demand national awareness of these acts of violence.
Her commitment to the uplift of women was also institutionalized in New York. From 1917 until her death, she was a dedicated member of the Committee of Management of the Harlem YWCA.
And she leveraged her influence there to ensure that the organization developed robust training programs in beauty skills for young women. She was integrating her commercial expertise with direct community development.
Beyond philanthropy and activism, she also built a literal architectural legacy that was itself a political statement.
Villa Lilwaro.
In 1917, she commissioned Vertner Tandy, the first licensed Black architect in New York City, to design this spectacular house for her in Irvington-on-Hudson, New York.
This project was an act of profound and deliberate audacity. The structure was a grand Italianate mansion. It cost $250,000 to build.
An astronomical sum at the time. I mean, that rivaled the mansions of the Gilded Age robber barons in that same neighborhood.
And Walker was completely unambiguous about its purpose. Villa Lilwaro was not intended to simply be a private residence.
She wanted it to be a gathering place for community leaders.
And, critically, a visible, tangible inspiration for other African Americans. A monument to what could be achieved. She moved into the house in May of 1918.
Her final acts of giving really defined the mission of her wealth. In 1918, she made the single largest individual contribution to the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs.
And she earmarked those funds specifically to help preserve Frederick Douglass's historic house in Anacostia. She was consciously linking her new legacy to the legacy of the previous generation's fight for freedom.
And then shortly before her death, her commitment to battling racial injustice really reached its peak. She pledged $5,000 to the NAACP's anti-lynching fund.
At that point in history, it was the largest individual gift the NAACP had ever received.
That contribution, it's estimated to be worth about $88,000 today. It just showed her powerful, unwavering financial commitment to fighting racial terrorism and securing basic civil rights.
And finally, that dedication to charity was institutionalized in her will. It stipulated that nearly $100,000 be bequeathed immediately to various institutions and individuals.
And critically, it directed that 2/3 of her estate's future net profits would go directly to charity.
She ensured that her business would continue to fund her mission long after she was gone.
Madam C.J. Walker died relatively young. On May 25, 1919, she was under 51.
The cause of death was kidney failure, which was complicated by hypertension.
At the time of her death, her wealth was estimated pretty conservatively at somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million.
That figure secured her verified status as the wealthiest African-American businesswoman and the wealthiest self-made Black woman in America.
The journey from being a child laundress, earning $1 a day, to the head of a multi-million-dollar empire in just 30 years. It's almost unimaginable.
Her 1919 obituary in the New York Times really captured her philosophy perfectly. It quoted her as saying she wanted the money, not that she wanted the money for herself, but for the good she could do with it.
And that commitment was honored by her daughter, Alelia Walker, who became the president of the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company and continued the operation very successfully.
And her legacies, both physical and documentary, have been rigorously preserved. Her voluminous papers and business records are held by the Indiana Historical Society. They provide this incredible insight into the mechanics of her empire.
And two of the properties central to her life are now enduring national monuments.
First, Villa Lawaro in Irvington, New York, that architectural statement we talked about. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979 and later designated a national treasure by the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
It's still this stunning and rare symbol of Black aspiration and achievement from that era.
And then there's the Indianapolis headquarters building. It was redesigned and expanded after her death and opened in December 1927.
And it was renamed the Madam Walker Theater Center. This place was a complete community hub.
Designed by the company's general manager, Freeman Ransom. It included the company offices and factory, a grand theater, a beauty school, a salon, a barbershop, a restaurant, a drugstore, a ballroom, all under one roof.
It was a social and commercial anchor for the Black community, and it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1980.
Her story continues to be told and honored in modern times across so many platforms. In 1993, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
The U.S. Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp for her in 1998 as part of its Black Heritage series.
Her story has also really permeated pop culture, which shows its continued resonance. You have the 2006 stage play The Dreams of Sarah Breedlove.
And that influential 1987 documentary, $2 in a Dream.
That was directed by Stanley Nelson, who is in this unique position to tell her story. He was the grandson of Freeman B. Ransom, Walker's attorney and general manager.
So he had access to the original Walker business records, which gave the film this high degree of historical accuracy.
And more recently, a very contemporary tribute. The Mattel Madam C.J. Walker Barbie doll, which was released in 2022. It introduced her legacy to a whole new generation.
But probably the most high-profile modern adaptation was the 2020 TV series, Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker, starring Octavia Spencer.
And this brought her story to a massive contemporary audience, but it also, it generated some unavoidable controversy about historical accuracy.
That's a critical point. While the series did a great job popularizing her story, reviews pointed out inaccuracies and fictionalizations that are sort of inherent in dramatizing history.
Specifically, the series fictionalized her competitor, Annie Turnbow Malone, turning her into a villain named Addie Monroe.
And Walker's great-great-granddaughter and biographer, Alelia Bundles, spoke out about these creative liberties. She pointed out this creation of a toxic rivalry where the historical records just show a business split, not some intense personal vendetta.
It really highlights that challenge of maintaining historical integrity when you're translating complex business and social history for mass consumption.
But still, her story continues to power commerce. The commercial legacy is so evident. Sundial Brands, a division of Unilever, has launched modern product lines under the names Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Culture and Madam by Madam C.J. Walker.
Her name and her brand still carry undeniable weight in the beauty industry, more than a century after her death.
So if we synthesize this incredible life, the transformation from an orphan laundress with just 3 months of schooling to the pioneering head of an international manufacturing firm, it's just abundantly clear that Madam C.J. Walker fundamentally altered the economic landscape for Black women in America.
She wasn't just selling products. She was selling independence, professionalism, and a blueprint for self-reliance.
And that really gets to the core of it.
It does. You consider the sheer scale of the network she built. 20,000 agents by 1917, all of them operating under a system that explicitly tied their commercial success to community uplift, to education, to financial literacy for women.
Her philosophy, which she institutionalized in her business practices and her final will, dictating that 2/3 of future profits would go to charity. That model is just exceptionally relevant today.
It is, and it raises this fascinating question for us to consider, built entirely on the foundation of her success. How does her model of entrepreneurship, one that explicitly prioritized and baked community welfare, vocational training, and financial independence for women directly into the core business structure, how does that challenge or inform our contemporary understanding of corporate social responsibility?
It's a powerful question. She proved, definitively, that building personal wealth and deliberately facilitating public good could be one and the same mission. She didn't wait until she was successful to be philanthropic. Her philanthropy was the very mechanism of her success.